I'm going to do a little brief introduction here, a little preamble, and then I'll get out of your way and let our esteemed guests take over. So I think I know most of you. My name is Jason Diebel. I'm the chair of the East Lyme Democratic Town Committee. If you don't know about the DTC, we are the local arm of the state Democratic Party, and our task is to assist Democrats who wish to run for office. So for this meeting, the moderator has asked that if you are not participating, you turn your mic off and your camera off. This will be the first event like this we've done before, so please try to be on your best behavior. If we have any issues, I will just remove people from the meeting. If you have a question that you would like answered at the during the meeting, or perhaps during a Q&A session at the end, please drop your questions into the chat, and I'll monitor that and make sure that those get fielded. So that's a little housekeeping. All right, I'd like to welcome everybody. This is the first of hopefully several of these community conversations. We've taken essential elements of our party platform and turned them into discussions that we're supposed to try and have in our community. Other discussions will be based on similar topics and will happen in the months ahead. We're looking to facilitate conversations around criminal justice, the environment, and all the while we're going to be looking to attract and encourage Democrats who are curious about running for office and public service. So please keep that in mind. But to focus on the matter at hand, after 1 month in office, President Biden has sent his ambitious immigration agenda to the House, so it's in play now. There's a lot to unpack, and I'm sure we will see more in the days and weeks ahead. There are many conversations to be had, deals to be struck, perspectives to be heard, and we, as the DTC, are very proud to be part of that conversation as it gets started. We're very pleased that you're joining us here tonight, so thanks for coming. I'd like to introduce our moderator, Kate Steele. Kate Steele is a TV personality, a storyteller, a former educator, and a current member of the Board of Education, my good buddy and neighbor. Why don't you say hi, Kate?
Hi, everyone. Hello. Thank you for being here with us tonight. So good to see so many faces, familiar faces, family and friends.
Zooming all the way from San Antonio, Texas, we have attorney Joseph Mott. He's practiced law, immigration law, for 43 years. His firm began as a small two-person operation and has grown to a large office with satellite locations. And I would also like to introduce my friend Esteban Garcia, who serves on the Dreamers Action Alliance at Southern Connecticut State University and is part of their Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Advocacy Council. He's also the Director of Finance for Southeastern Connecticut Organization for Racial Equality, or SCORE, and serves on the East Lyme Public Schools District-Wide Committee on Diversity and Inclusion. He holds a bachelor's degree from the University of Connecticut and an MBA from New England College of Business. He is a native of Colombia, and Esteban came to the U.S. after graduating high school at age 16. So thank you very much for participating. Oh, and look, there's my daughter behind us.
Is that Jade?
That is Jasmine. She looks like
Jasmine. Hi,
making
Jasmine.
Some tea. All right. Nice. So without further ado, I will get out of your way here, and I'm just going to encourage you to have a nice conversation. Thank you very much for participating.
Well, thank you so much, Jason, for that. And I would suggest that people who are watching put it on speaker view so you can basically hear the question and then hear the response. And then back and forth, I would imagine most of this is going to go between my brother Joe. Full disclosure, Joe is my brother, and I've known him since the day I was born. And I always looked up to him, and he became an immigration lawyer and has done an amazing job with his career. And then Esteban, he and I campaigned together. So we became friends when we were out on the campaign trail together. So if I could start with you, Joe, immigration law and your practice. Tell me a little bit about your practice. How did you get started?
Well, when I first out of law school, trying to make a living, so hustling for any kind of case I could get, and so did divorces and wills and child custody stuff and evictions and all kinds of different things. Worked at Bexar County Legal Aid for a while and did immigration. I always liked the immigration law, If you're doing criminal law, I think all law is noble, the practice of law, but you're doing criminal law, you're representing some guy, maybe he didn't do it, or maybe he did, you're trying to get him off or try to turn his life around. You're doing divorce work, oh, she's an unfit mother, and you get those kind of arguments. The immigrants, though, I really think are good people looking to make a better life for themselves. Want to come to the United States, still considered a destination for all kinds of people, despite the problems we've got. I think this is maybe the best place to live. So they want to make a better life for themselves. They're working hard to make better lives for themselves. And in the process, they make a better country for all of us. So that was kind of what attracted me to immigration law. I started doing some cases and loved it and did more and more. And then after a number of years, became pretty much all I did was just immigration law. If you're from another country, want to live in the U.S., I would try to help you to fix your papers.
Nice. Sounds like a good story, and I'm glad to hear that. You know, you've been my older brother my whole life, and I never asked you why you got into immigration law. I always knew you wanted to be a lawyer, but then how you basically fell into that practice specifically is news to me. And being in San Antonio, Texas seems like a perfect place to get started in that business.
We're 150 miles from the Mexican border, so I think 60% Hispanic, mostly Mexican descent people in San Antonio. But in my practice, I had clients not just from Mexico, but also Central America, South America, then clients from Europe, clients from Canada, clients from Iran, all over the world, people wanting to come to the United States, and we try to help them with that process.
Nice, very nice. Thank you, Joe, so much. And I'll ask you some more questions about that, but I want Esteban to have some equal time here. Now, Esteban, you were 16 years old when you came to the United States. Tell us about your initial experience as a student, a high school student. You moved to New London, if I remember correctly.
Yes. Thank you, Kate. So yes, my family and came, with us, my brother and I, to the United States back in the year 2000 when I was 16. In Colombia, there's only 11 years of schooling, so I tried to, finish high school here, but for a couple of reasons, they decided that I had already graduated, so I was made to go to college or learn English before, they wouldn't let me go to high school here. So that was kind of like a interesting experience, coming to a new country. Like I had a good grasp of the English language as far as specifically like written and writing, but I didn't know really how to speak. So I spent my first year to 2 years really immersing myself in speaking language, taking taking English courses, watching a lot of TV, just to get to know, be able to do that. When we came to the United States, my dad started a business a few months after getting here. Something that we'll probably talk about a little bit later on is a lot of immigrants are really entrepreneurial just because they have a lot of regular job opportunities are not available to them. So we started a business. And can you just imagine at 16 years old trying to negotiate a lease in a storefront, trying to figure out like business form, tax forms, all that in a different language. So that was definitely an experience that really stuck with me, and then also guided my later on in my years, my passion to be an advocate for immigrants. Come to this country because I know how much they can offer, and having had the experience of that, definitely that's guided my work as Southern and beyond to advocate for immigrants and for immigration.
Well, very nice. Thank you for that. And you didn't say the word struggle, but I don't imagine it was easy, Esteban. I'm sure that there were hurdles that you had to climb over or figure out how to navigate, and that it wasn't always easy.
You're right. Yeah, it wasn't always easy, especially, trying to navigate a different language, different, different norms, things like that, different weather. So trying to navigate through all that, and also, you know, with my parents, we were lucky that, you know, and I didn't know this until later on, that the avenue that we were given to become, you know, citizens and permanent residents is very limited. There's only a certain number of these type of visas they give to people every year, and there's a huge competition for that. So at first I thought, okay, this is very, you know, simple, and there's a process. And then as I learned more about it, I know that, you know, like my experience was in a way kind of unique or out of the norm. A lot of people that try to come to the United States, and I'm sure Joe can talk about that a little bit more, they have a difficult time, and that's why you know, you end up with a large population that ends up overstaying their visas, or, you know, coming to the through the southern or northern borders, because there isn't really, as you know, as compared to the past, you know, in the 20th century and the 19th century, the laws that are currently in place are much different and much more strict for people to be able to become permanent residents and eventually citizens.
Okay, so was your brother older or younger?
Younger.
He was a younger brother. And what was the business that your family did?
So my family did a, it was a financial services business geared to cater to the Hispanic population. So we did a lot of you know, money transferring services. We also did a lot of educational services. So we did, you know, selling books to learn English. We partnered with different organizations in the New London area, like literacy volunteers, to use our space to hold ESL classes and conversation groups and things like that. So we did that, and, you know, within a year we were growing, and we ended up actually even hiring U.S. citizens in our business. So we're creating jobs for folks that were U.S. born. So, and then we eventually ended up selling the business and moving on to other things.
So you started out as a community leader from the minute you hit ground in our country. That's amazing. And plus you already had the financial understanding of the money and how to manage it. That sounds great. Joe, if you would share a little bit about your work.
This basic orientation, I can say what Esteban kind of referenced. To immigrate to the United States, generally, someone has to file a petition for you, either a relative or an employer.
Okay.
And the kinds of relatives that can petition for you are parents who are U.S. citizens or green card holders, a spouse who's a U.S. citizen, a brother or sister that's a citizen, or an adult son or daughter that's a citizen. Those are the parents that can petition, or the relatives that can petition for you. If you're married to a U.S. citizen, or you have an adult son or daughter who's a citizen, or you have if you're the parent and the child is under 21, there are always visas available to those people. There's never a waiting list for those kind of visas. But if your brother's petitioning for you, that waiting list can be 20 years long, and it's only moving a month a year. So it's not really a waiting list at all. It's a dead end. Some people talk about anchor babies. Come to the United States and have a baby and you can stay. Well, that's not really true. When that baby turns 21, the baby can petition for you. But up until that time, the baby cannot file any petition, give you any benefit in that sense. I had a client, did some consultations yesterday. People called me and they said, our daughter just turned 18. She wants to file a petition for you. I said, well, petition for us. I said, let's talk again in 3 years. On her 21st birthday, we can have a little cake and we can file that petition showing she's a U.S. citizen, born in the USA, born in a hospital here, wants to petition for her mom and dad. So we can do that, but not until she turns 21. You can sometimes immigrate for your job, but usually to immigrate for your job, you have to show a shortage of U.S. workers for the job that you're going to do. So first stop is not U.S. Immigration, but the Department of Labor. You go to the Department of Labor and ask them for a certificate that there's not enough U.S. workers to do this job. How do you convince the Department of Labor there's not enough workers? You advertise. Put an ad in the paper. We're looking for a chef in a Chinese restaurant. Must be able to prepare mushi pancakes and Peking duck. And if a U.S. citizen or a resident alien, somebody with their green card, shows up and say, hey, I can do this job, then the Department of Labor is going to tell you, no, you don't need to bring somebody from China or wherever, because we've got a U.S. worker here that can do it. But if there aren't U.S. workers available, then you can immigrate for your job. And depending on the kind of job, there may be a visa available fairly quickly. If you're, if it's a skilled job, if it's a less skilled job, might again be years and years waiting for that visa to become available. Sometimes people can also apply for political asylum. It's something you see in the news now. It's a big issue. People pushing from terrible conditions in Central America want to come to the United States, seeking to be refugees, wanting to apply for political asylum. To apply for asylum, you have to show you have a well-founded fear of persecution in your home country on account of your race, your religion, your political opinion, your membership in a particular group. So sometimes that's hard for these people to show. If you come from, oh, I live in Honduras and it's terrible. Gangs are running around. They're extorting people. They're robbing people. They're murdering people. I fled for my own safety. Well, it's a terrible situation, but can you show that you're being persecuted on account of your race, your religion, your political opinion, your membership in a particular group? Sometimes it's hard to do that. So, well, yeah, I'm this particular group. I'm one that they're looking to persecute, and so it becomes difficult. An easier asylum case would be, for example, if you say, well, it's on account of my religion I'm being persecuted. We had clients, for example, from Iran. They would come to the United States and study here and become friends, become interested in Christianity and convert from Islam to Christianity. And so then they could say, now I want to apply for asylum. If I go back to Iran, you can show in the Muslim holy book, the Quran, that anybody who converts from Islam to Christianity is to be persecuted. It's you can cite chapter and verse in the book. So that's that kind of a case. That's a little easier to establish. It's persecution on account of religion. The question then becomes, is this really a conversion, or is this something that you're just doing to get your immigration papers? And the immigration officers question that closely to make sure this is a legitimate deal. Sometimes we would have the minister from the church, the priest, come and testify. No, this person is sincere in their beliefs. They have made this conversion to Christianity, and they fear what would happen if they'd have to return to Iran, for example. So those are kind of the cases that we deal with.
Well, it sounds interesting, and it sounds very important as well. And one thing that I heard about is that there's different terms. Sometimes we call people undocumented, sometimes we call them illegal, and sometimes we call them unauthorized. And what do we call them? What is the preferred term? And I don't know who would like to take that question.
I can give it a start on that, and maybe Joe can also add more about like what is the actual say in the law. So there's been a lot of conversations and debate over the last decade about what term is legally correct, what term is has there's some terms that have some underlying discriminatory tones, and that's the term illegal. And when you look at what the actual law says, and like for the majority of the immigrants that's come here and they're not authorized, at least in Connecticut and the Northeast, most of them are coming on a tourist visa. They're right here with permission, and then they overstayed their permission, and that that in the eyes of the law is actually a civil offense. It's not a criminal offense. So there's different distinctions in the Title 8 of the U.S. Code that, has references to all those different terms: illegal alien, unauthorized alien, or undocumented alien. They're all used, in the law. But what the consensus is from news organizations, from legal activists, is that using the term illegal kind of like dehumanizes the population. Is not technically accurate for all immigrants that are not authorized to be here. So the preferred term, and what you see mostly on in the news and even in Congress when when they're talking about this set of population, is that they're called either unauthorized or undocumented immigrants to explain the circumstances of their stay here. So that's more accurate to be referred to.
Okay, so the goal is for people to become lawful permanent residents if that is their wish. But sometimes people don't want to be citizens. They don't want to be immigrants, right? They don't want to move the path towards citizenship, correct?
So so that we can look at it two ways. There is, and you gotta also understand like what is the reason that they are coming to the United States. A good number of people, especially in the South and Southwest, are coming to come to work in agricultural areas. So up until the mid 20th century, there used to be guest worker programs, the program called the Bracero program, which allowed many Mexican nationals to come and work temporarily and legally in the United States in the agricultural area, because there were shortages of U.S. Citizens that wanted to work in that, and that was an area that we needed workers. And then they used to come here and work seasonally and go back and forth. Over the years, those type of programs, that program was eliminated, and the number of those type of visas available have basically dried up. So that created, in effect, a set of people that wanted to come here to work in those type of jobs, and for fear of not being able to go back and forth, they stayed in the United States. And hopefully, we'll have more time to talk about in the next few minutes about the history of different how the law has evolved over the history of the United States, and how laws, when a lot of the Europeans immigrants came to the United States in the 19th and most of the 20th century, are much different than they are now. A lot of the immigrants that came back then, if we applied the same type of laws and regulations that we have now, they wouldn't have been able to come in.
Right.
So definitely, I think there'll be something worth exploring for.
Okay. Okay. Joe, did you want to answer that question that Esteban? Did you want to change anything or clarify anything?
No, sounds good to me. All kinds of people immigrating to the United States, just to give maybe an example, be helpful to the audience. Esteban mentioned people doing agricultural work, and I've had Texas ranchers sit across the desk from me saying, if I couldn't hire these people to do the work, I'd have to go to ranching. You just can't get people to do these jobs. So they're in the agricultural industry. That's a very high percentage of those people are without papers, trying to fix their papers. So some way for them to become legal is helpful. But then there are also people too, other kinds of cases. Typical case would be like a student, for example, from China, and he's got a degree in, let's say, in computer science, and there's a company that wants to hire him to do computer programming, website maintenance development. If they can go through this procedure I described earlier, then show they can't find a U.S. worker to do this particular job, then that computer scientist can immigrate to the United States. Or we had another case comes to mind, a company in Italy that was doing aircraft modification, and they had aeronautical engineers that they wanted to transfer from work in their jobs in Italy to their jobs in the United States. So these are skilled professionals coming to work in the U.S. and those kind of jobs. So there's all kinds of different jobs that people do. When you immigrate to the United States, you get your green card. People talk about it. Then you are a lawful permanent resident of the United States. So if you're coming from France, for example, you're still a citizen of France, but you've become a lawful permanent resident of the United States. If you immigrated for your job, you have to wait 5 years that you've had your green card, and then you can apply if you want to become a U.S. citizen. Some people say, no, I don't want to do that, as you alluded to. I'm here living and working. I've got a job. I've got a work permit. I've got a social security number. I want to stay as a citizen of France. I don't want to become a U.S. citizen. But most people think, no, I'd like to become a U.S. citizen. So after they have their green card, 5 years, they can apply to become U.S. citizens. If you're married to and living with a U.S. citizen spouse, they give you a quicker path to citizenship, only 3 years. They figure if you've got a U.S. citizen spouse, then you're going to become more quickly attached to the United States. So after 5 years or 3 years, you can apply for citizenship. When you apply for citizenship, you have to show that you can read, write, and speak English, that you know about U.S. history and government, that you're a person of good moral character. So you go apply for citizenship, and they ask questions like, who was the first president of the United States? How many stars in the flag? What do they stand for? How many stripes? What do they stand for? What are the 3 branches of government? How many judges serve on the U.S. Supreme Court? Different questions like that. And if you can show that, send your fingerprints to the FBI, you haven't got a arrest record, a serious arrest record, you've been paying your taxes, you're registered for selective service as you were required to register, then your English is good, then you can become a U.S. citizen. You go down and get sworn in. Sometimes you can become a citizen. Used to be, as Esteban mentioned, these things kind of evolved. Used to be when you became a U.S. citizen, you had to renounce any citizenship in any other country, citizen of the U.S. and nothing else. That's kind of changed a little bit because some of the other countries say, well, we don't care if you're a U.S. citizen. We still consider you a citizen of our country. So if you ever want to come back, we're not going to require you to give up your passport, and you're a citizen of both countries. In Mexico, they specifically say that Mexican citizenship is not lost, the Mexican government says, when you become a U.S. citizen. So I have a number of clients, when they come into the U.S., they reach in this pocket and they pull out the U.S. passport, come in the short line as U.S. citizens. They go to Mexico, they pull out the Mexican passport, go in that short line as a Mexican citizen. So those are some of the issues that we deal with in the immigration process, the citizenship process.
So that dual citizenship is really important for some people. And somebody asked a question, what is an illegal immigrant?
Well, people take offense at the word illegal. It's like no human being is illegal. So Esteban just talked about that, maybe undocumented, unauthorized, whatever. So if you don't have papers, a lot of clients, they say, how did you enter the United States? Did you have a visa? Did you have a passport? Did you have a local crossing card? How did you come to this country? And clients would tell me, con la ayuda de Dios. I came with God's help. I waded the river and I came on in, and here I am. I've now fallen in love with a U.S. citizen. We've gotten married. We've got a baby on the way, and I think I need to do something about fixing my papers. So
if I could interrupt, Joe, and Esteban, help me with this, because if you're having difficulty and maybe your language competencies aren't that strong, because English is not necessarily the easiest language to learn, and if you miss a date on your green card and you don't file the paper correctly, and if you don't have the support, then you might fall into that category. where you're undocumented or not legal, as we're saying, right?
Yeah, and one thing that's important and Joe kind of mentioned this a little bit, there's certain pathways that you can reach. But if you don't fall in any of those categories, you're kind of at a standstill. You can't, it's not like you just fill out an application and you just wait to get processed. That it doesn't really work like that, especially for a lot of people that are already here. So that's something that it's a misconception for a lot of people, just because they think, oh, why don't you just fill out an application and just wait your turn. Also, it's a legal process, and it's very recommended that you enlist the help of an attorney, and that costs money. Attorneys, very good attorneys like Joe, they're worth every penny, and that was my own experience with my family. We spent thousands and thousands, probably tens of thousands of dollars going through that. My family came through a job opportunity that my mom was given, and her employer also had to put a lot of money to do that, because as Joe was mentioning, there was they were looking for somebody with her specific set of skills, and they weren't able to find anybody until they came across her. But that costs also a lot of money for them and time. So you have to have somebody willing to, especially if you're coming through the employment route, willing to sponsor you, to wait, to spend money and resources. And also the immigrant needs to be able to pay a lot of money. Also immigration fees you have to pay. One of the things that the immigration system is mostly self-funded, so they operate based on the fees that people pay for citizenship, for green cards, for different processes. So that's where they get pretty much the majority of their funding.
So it sounds to me like it's kind of a complicated system and not necessarily easy to navigate. And I did find out about something that's in our area. And Joe, I don't know if you have this in Texas. It's called the Immigration Advocacy and Support Center. It's a 501c3 nonprofit that exists in New London, and it helps people with that process. And it's very reasonable for people who are interested in that. But maybe, Joe, you were in practice for quite a few years. How has it changed over the years? And what was it like, with our most recent president, our 45th president of the United States? What were some of the things that you saw that happened over the years?
Well, as Esteban said, a lot of times people would come in, and the longer I practiced, the more difficult it got. The more restrictive the law seemed to get, and I particularly felt sorry for these dreamers, the DACA children. So a typical case would be a couple comes in from Mexico carrying a baby in arms. The baby is a year old. The kid grows up in the United States. He's now 17 years old. He says, "Mom and Dad, they're going to have a field trip from school, a big trip. We're all going to go down to Mexico for a visit." And they say, "Oh, mijo, son, there's something I need to tell you. You can't go on that trip because you're not really legal in this country. If you go to Mexico, you're going to get stuck down there." He said, "What? What are you telling me? No, you can't. You don't have papers here." "But I'm an American. I grew up. This is my country. This is the only country I know." "No, if immigration catches you, they're going to send you home to Mexico." "Home to Mexico? I don't know anything about Mexico. I don't want to know anything about Mexico. This is my country." So those people come to the office and they say, "What can I do?" And before we had this DACA program for the dreamers, they say, "I'm sorry, there's nothing you can do. The law makes no provision for you." And that was the whole thinking behind this process. President Obama said, well, there's a lot of people in the United States without papers. We can't deport them all. If you round them up, you just physically, we can't move them all out. There's too many. Let's prioritize. Who are we going to go after? Let's go after people that are causing problems in the community. They're getting involved in violent crime. They're dealing drugs or whatever. let's concentrate on those people and kick them out. Well, what about these kids that grow up here that came in as a baby? They weren't born here. They don't have anybody that can petition for them. What do we do about them? He said, I want to make a special break for them. We're going to defer any action on them. We know they're not here, but we're just going to put it off. We got millions of people to take care of before we get around to taking care of these kids. Let's give them deferred action because they're childhood arrivals. So DACA, DACA, the dreamers they call it. So those kind of people were given permits. So that was a change that took place in the law that was good. Another change in the law that was good maybe was under the Violence Against Women Act. A lot of times, say there'd be a woman here, sometimes a man, who's married to somebody who is abusive. And the spouse knows that they don't have papers. And they say, well, if you don't like it, I'm going to call immigration and have you deported. Well, the Violence Against Women Act put an end to that. They say, no, if you're being abused by your spouse and the spouse refuses to petition for you, you can file your own petition as a battered spouse. So that was a benefit of the law. Yeah, but as you mentioned, there are all kinds of different people doing immigration law. Esteban, they had the families up there, the law firm up there in Connecticut, and I'm sure those lawyers up there are more expensive than us folks here in Texas. And we do cases all over the country too, of course. But nonprofit organizations helping immigrants is a tremendous need, and so a lot of people are jumping in and helping, and some of them nonprofit organizations very reasonable prices. Yeah, we try to be reasonable with the law firm too, but we're not free, man.
No, you have to pay the electricity and keep up on the law too, because it's constantly changing. And Esteban, I think you had some comments about maybe what happened during different administration. And Joe, you've alluded to this too. There's, Bush understood it because he was in Texas and was probably closer to it than other parts of the country, perhaps. But, then the Reagan administration, Esteban, would you like to talk a little bit about the history?
Yeah, absolutely. And if I may, I want to go really go back far in the history of the United States. Even before there was the United States, one of the things that I like to do when I'm giving conversations, doing conversations on immigration is to look at it from a historical perspective and look at, do like what is called a land acknowledgement, which acknowledging that the United States was built as a nation of immigrants. Some immigrants came here looking for better opportunities, but originally, this land, especially where you and I are living on, Kate, it was originally inhabited by the Mohegan and the Western Atlantic people. And then over the years, we have immigrants from Europe, from Northern Europe at first, and then Southern Europe. Some people were brought to this country against their will, as it was the case from enslaved people. And in the 20th and 21st century, we've seen a lot of immigration from Asia and Latin America. But so going back to like the beginning of the United States, the first act that talked about immigration or citizenship was back in 1790, which is the Naturalization Act. Basically, there's a lot of research shows that, a lot of the immigration laws in the United States have come with a history of, undertones of racism and exclusion of the other people, that don't look like us. And that first act in 1790 excluded non-whites from becoming citizens. And all you needed to become a citizen was just prove here that you were here for 2 years and be of good moral character. Then that 2-year requirement was extended to 5 years, and then 14 years and back to 5 years. But that was basically, you just have to show that you were here. It wasn't until 1870 that people of African descent were able to become citizens. So that was almost 100 years after that first line. And then the next big important act was in 1882, which is the Chinese Exclusion Act, which banned Chinese laborers for 10 years from the United States. And Chinese immigrants that were here were before 1880 were allowed to stay here, but they were not able to naturalize. And then we have other acts, and excluding people from basically any Asian countries, except for the Philippines, which at that point was a colony of the United States. And the only requirement that you had, to become a citizen was you just have to be able to read in any language. Now you have to have a proficiency in English, but before it was just any language that you have. And then as years went on, there was different opportunities for people to what is called colloquially as amnesty. So if you came here and didn't have your papers in order, you were able to the opportunity to do that. And then throughout the years, throughout different political parties. So it's not just a Democrat thing or Republican thing. The most recent so-called amnesty was done signed by President Ronald Reagan in 1986, which was the last time there was a large-scale opportunity for people that didn't have legal status to become citizens, in a fairly easy way. But then after that, we became, as a country, more strict and more focused on enforcement of that, as opposed to creating more avenues for people to come here legally. There's a set of quotas that were created for a number of employment people. We talked about visas for employment people that needed certain skills. There's a limited number of those visas available every year. That number was established back in 1990. It hasn't been updated. Those quotas are still the same 30 years later. But the population has grown dramatically since. So that's why there's also such a huge backlog of cases, as Joe mentioned. And if you bring a brother or a sister, it could take 10, 20 years or more. So basically, there's no way. So that's something important to talk about, that back when many European immigrants came through Ellis Island, that's very famous in the U.S. history. The requirement, they just really looked at them to make sure that they had some money. They weren't necessarily looking for rich people, but just to have some money, and that they didn't have any sicknesses, such as that they were contagious. Back then, through Ellis Island, only about less than 2% of people that came through there were actually denied entry. Everyone else was let in, which is great, and we can see the the benefits that was for the U.S. That wealth of culture and labor and spirit of trying to make a better life in the United States that we saw, and we saw that reap rewards. But we have changed our laws to not be as welcoming anymore.
Right, like the Statue of Liberty, bring us, you're tired, you're hungry, you're poor. And I was looking today, 8 of our presidents, Thomas Jefferson's mom was from England, Andrew Jackson's, both parents were from Ireland, James Buchanan's father was from Ireland, Chester Arthur's father was from Ireland, Woodrow Wilson's mother was from England, Herbert Hoover's mother was from Canada, Barack Obama's father was from Kenya, and Donald Trump's mother was from Scotland. And then, of course, our vice president now, Kamala Harris, has a history of immigrants on both sides with her parents. So, you see it in our leaders. And I had the opportunity to look up and find out, and it was American icons who you may not even know were immigrants. And the list was amazing, as far as like Albert Einstein, and Yo-Yo Man and the founders of Google. So it's our entrepreneurs.
Kate, we only have about 15 minutes or less than 15 minutes left. I wonder if anybody in our audience has a specific question that we could address. Anybody?
Well, they've been sending some questions, and I've been asking, and the one you answered was about Donald Trump and the DACAs. And somebody asked about the right to vote, and of course, you'd only have the right to vote if you became a citizen, and that would happen after 5 years, and you file for citizenship, and you swear an oath to. Maybe you want to talk about that, Rich or Joe?
When you become a citizen, yeah, usually, I think maybe sometimes in some municipal elections or whatever, they let people who are not yet citizens vote. But the general rule is yes, you have to become a U.S. citizen to vote. And the citizenship application, one of the things they're pretty strict about is if you ever voted unlawfully. But then when you become a citizen, you can vote. So that's a big impetus for a lot of people to become citizens. They want to be able to vote. They want to be able to participate fully in our democracy.
Well, I think sometimes they take it more seriously than, voter turnout sometimes is 40, maybe 60% in a good year. So I think sometimes our immigrants, our newly sworn in citizens become more involved and participatory than some people who've kind of taken it for granted.
Okay, if I may add something on that, because one of the things that you see discussed in the news or talk shows is that, because, people from the Democratic Party are more vocal about their support to have new immigrants become citizens, that it's because they want to have those folks vote for them. But, looking at it from especially the immigrants coming from Latin America, they actually tend to align more ideologically. They have more conservative ideals and values. So they, if anything, they will probably be more attracted to the conservative fiscal policies and religious policies of the Republican Party than they would be of the Democratic. It's something that you see, for example, in Florida, a lot of the Cuban immigrants, they tend to be Republican. So that's something that's kind of interesting. That it's not a clear, divide. It's not a clear actually benefit net gain for Democratic voters, but it's actually they're more likely to then, like my own parents, they have more conservative. No, they're U.S. citizens. They're more conservative ideals and kind of like, especially when it comes to fiscal things that align more with Republican Party ideals than they do with Democratic ones.
So somebody asked a question, can you comment ex post facto with regard to immigration and immigration law?
I don't know what that means.
I don't either. I thought you would. So here's another question. Somebody said, is it fair for immigrants who go through a legal pathway to citizenship if we grant amnesty? Is that fair in your opinion?
It doesn't hurt them any. There's a parable in the Bible about that, isn't there? The people that start working all day and the ones that come at noon and one that come at the middle of the afternoon. At the end of the day, the owner of the vineyard pays them all the same. The people that started early say, well, it wasn't fair. I worked the whole day, but they were paid the agreed wage. So if you grant amnesty to where people are here, then is that hurting anybody who is on the waiting list to come in? Well, not really. They're still on the waiting list to come in. You haven't taken anything away from them. But the better focus, I think, is if you have in this country, say, 11 million people who aren't documented, who don't have their papers, or are living in some kind of underground society. Is that good for the country? Is that good for our society? Ronald Reagan invited these people during the amnesty program that Esteban mentioned earlier in 1986, invited them to come out of the shadows, participate fully in our country. This is a country we're in together. We want you to be a part of it. That is maybe where our focus should be. How do we deal with this as a society when we have these people here that are contributing, they're working, they're part of our country? Let's incorporate them fully. Let's channel that energy. Immigrants are an opportunity, a resource for us, not a threat, but something that can make our country better. We are a nation of immigrants. Immigrants made America great, And with a little luck, immigrants might save us. We need to take advantage of the fact that we have so many people here who love this country and want to make a better life for themselves, and in the process, make a better country for us all.
And that was one thing, if I may, Kate. So, like, it's important to see that the 11 million immigrants that are here documented, about an overwhelming majority of them have been here for more than 5 years. About 50% of those came before the year 2000. So it's been 20 years that they've been here. So they're already a part of the fabric of our country, of our cities, of our towns. Joe mentioned the case of the DACA kids, and in my job at Southern, I meet a lot of them, and stories are always the same. Like, I grew up, in Connecticut, in the United States. I barely speak any English or any Tagalog or any other, language where their family's from. So they, for all intents and purposes, they are Americans. They grew up here. They went through our education K-12 system. Now they're going to college, and then you gotta also look at the the human part. And they want to educate, especially the ones that I see, they want to educate themselves, go to college. We have in the United States a huge problem with lack of people coming into the healthcare area. We have an aging population that we're just getting older and older as a country, and we're gonna need a lot of people working in the healthcare area. I see that. And a lot of these students that I see, that a lot of them want to become nurses or doctors or work in the healthcare professions, which we struggle to, attract people to go into those fields, enough people to meet the demand. And we have that population that wants to be here, wants to get educated, wants to contribute, because this is their country. They don't know Mexico, they don't know Colombia, they don't know Philippines or somewhere in Africa where they were born, but they haven't been there. They didn't grow up there.
Right. And they pay, immigrants pay taxes. If they're working in a job, they pay taxes.
Right. That was one of the things that, some people, to find a job, they might work using somebody else's papers, or they might, do that work. But they if they're working with an employer, they're paying federal and state income tax. There's a statistic in Connecticut, undocumented households pay $335 million in federal taxes and $197 million in state taxes. One of the things that undocumented folks are not able to apply for social services that we think of, such as food stamps, or apply for Husky healthcare. If you're not documented, you can't apply for those services. But yet, people think that they're coming in for their resources, but they're actually contributing to that. In general, the immigrant population, especially if it's undocumented, is younger than the general population of the United States. So they're paying a lot of money into Social Security, which they may or may not be able to draw off. So they're actually helping that Social Security fund, which we know it's a big problem that might go insolvent in the near future. So they're actually helping bolster it up, even though they might not be able to ever be able to access that money.
Mm-hmm.
And they're paying sales tax too, of course, Esteban. They're paying rent. When you pay rent, your landlord setting the rent figures part of the what is the real estate tax I'm going to have to pay on this building. That's got to works into your rent. So to say that the immigrant is not contributing, not paying their part, I think is just wrong. It's not true.
Okay, that's good to know. It's good to have these conversations. I think this is a really rich kind of back and forth between real life experience for both of you, Esteban from coming actually and joining us, and Joe for the work that you did, kind of being the bridge for a lot of people.
Oh, it was a great career, immigration law. Immigrants are wonderful people, and like I say, great people to work for. they have a dream, and if you can help them to realize that dream, it's very wonderful.
And they bring so much. Some of our best musicians, scientists, Albert Einstein, our basketball players, Arnold Schwarzenegger, movie stars, Michael J. Fox. There's just so many people that are just American icons that we just think of, as part of our culture and part of the fabric of who we are, and not necessarily so. So Rupert Murdoch, for another one, newspaper. So it's good. And I see, Jason, you've jumped back on.
Yeah, I just wanted to say some closing remarks and say some thank yous. And I wouldn't dream of shutting off our illustrious guests here. So I would like to take a moment and invite you, either of you or both of you or neither of you, if you have any closing remarks or anything that you'd like to kind of finish off the conversation with before we say our final farewells for this evening.
Well, thanks for having us, Jason. It was a great opportunity to be here. I think it's a tremendous thing you're doing, having these conversations, people to think about some of these issues, and happy to be a part of it. And I hope something I said maybe helps people to understand how the whole process works and gives them a better insight into this.
Yes, and thank you, Jason and Kate and Joe, for the opportunity to host this. And I know, as you mentioned, this is going to be the first of many conversations that we're going to have on different topics of interest. And thank you for the opportunity to share my experience in my work with in my research with the students that I work with.
Yeah, and hopefully we will have you on the Board of Ed later on this year when you are elected and bring all that knowledge. And I mean, I've known you a long time. We've hung out a lot of times. I had no idea that you had so much information. You're just like a wealth of knowledge. So I look forward to hearing more of that in the future. Yes, as our guests have alluded to, this is the first of many conversations that we're planning on having. If you enjoyed this and would like to come back, the next discussion that we have planned is tentatively scheduled for Earth Day, April 22nd, where we're going to have East Lyme native and entrepreneur and environmental scientist Rosemary Ostfeld. She'll be talking about another pillar, another tenet of the Democratic Party platform, which of course is the environment. So we hope to see you all there. Thank you all very much for coming and making this such an interesting and engaging experience. Special thanks, of course, to Kate for moderating, Esteban for being willing to share his experience, and Mr. Mott, thank you very much. I hope that you're staying warm down there in Texas. We are thinking of you guys.
Oh yeah, thanks. Water's the issue right now. They cut off electricity for the water system, so they can't pump water to our house. But hopefully they're getting that fixed up. I think it's going to improve here. The snow has stopped.
Well, we're hoping that everything works out for you.
Tough up there in Connecticut, putting up with all this snow, man.
Thanks very much.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you all. Nice comments. Thank you so much.